James with me. And today we're talking about the item which is all over the news headlines, which is that Trump has been convicted, or has been found guilty, I should say, rather, on all 34 counts in this ongoing hush money trial with Stormy Daniels. Now, I haven't followed the trial too closely. James is our legal expert, so James is going to give you guys the more detailed perspective. I'm really here as the uninformed bystander who's going to ask the stupid questions to James and see what James thinks.
The
So,
questions are never stupid, Morgan.
well, the uninformed questions. So we'll see. So, James, lay out some of the groundwork for people. Just what were the issues in the case, and just explicate it a bit for us.
Long, long ago, before he ever thought about running for president, this woman, porn star Stormy Daniels, said that she had had an affair, and the rumor was going around that she'd had an affair with Donald Trump. The tabloids in America had gotten wind of it. And so there was concern that as they approached the 2016 election, when Donald Trump is first running for president, that this story would get out. Now, Donald Trump had, at the time of the Stormy Daniels thing, a close relationship with the owner of American media, which controls some of the important tabloids in this country. A non-disclosure agreement was reached with Stormy Daniels. Don't talk about this, and we'll pay a certain amount of money. Now, Stormy Daniels herself was not terribly credible on this. She said, "I just want the truth to come out. I don't care about the money." And then she immediately signs a non-disclosure agreement and accepted money. So apparently it was about the money, and she could be shut up. But the point is, non-disclosure agreements of this kind are perfectly legal. Non-disclosure agreements happen all the time in American law. They are entirely legal, even if it's hush money about something embarrassing, whether, whatever the embarrassing thing is. Truth is suppressed all the time by financial means. Now, someone may say that in a political context that ought to be illegal, but it is not. And I can give you examples of many other examples of politicians who've used non-disclosure agreements to keep certain information from becoming public. Bill Clinton in the 1990s, the president, was famous for his many, many, many affairs. And his own people said, they assigned people. Hillary Clinton, his own wife, was assigned to control what they called, not my words, bimbo eruptions. And they tried to pay these women off so that none of this would come to light. Now, the question is, how did this pan out in terms of getting Trump eventually? Well, it was looked into by the Federal Election Commission, which has the jurisdiction over regulating and enforcing the regulations on election laws, federal election laws. They had looked into this and they cleared him. A person can use their own money infinitely in a campaign. The example often used is a haircut. I may be getting a certain kind of haircut or haircuts more frequently because I'm running for political office, but nonetheless, it's a personal expense. It couldn't be charged to my donors. You see, as a campaign expense, that would be inappropriate. This non-disclosure agreement, had it been listed as a campaign expense, would have been probably run afoul of the federal election regulations because it in effect was a personal expense. Now, the Federal Election Commission years ago cleared Trump on this. The Justice Department looked into this. They decided not to file anything. The New York DA, they looked at it and they actually even passed on it as well at an initial point. In an attempt, what is obviously an attempt to destroy the political future of Donald Trump, the elected district attorney in New York, a guy named Alvin Bragg, ran on, "I will get Trump. We will find a crime and we will prosecute him." And he finds two misdemeanors under New York state law that might be applicable. False business entry, which is normally a misdemeanor offense. If you're a public corporation and you make a false business entry, that in itself is a crime. Now, it's just a misdemeanor unless you have the intent to get away with some other crime. That elevates it to the level of a felony, which involves more than a year in prison potentially and much more serious legal consequences. So in order to, and by the way, before he even filed this, the misdemeanor statute of limitations had passed. In order to file it at all, he had to find some other crime. One of the problems, and here I recommend people follow the commentary of Professor Jonathan Turley of George Washington University. I think his commentary has been outstanding on this, and fair and accurate on this. I really do. The other crime wasn't specified. It wasn't specified in the indictment. It wasn't even revealed. Now, as everyone knows, one of the basic parts of due process, indeed, the Sixth Amendment itself says that the accused has a right to know the crime that he's being charged with. How on earth are you supposed to prepare a defense, marshal evidence or witnesses, if you don't know the crime that in effect forms the basis for the underlying crime? That was never made clear. That is, in my view, a clear violation of the Constitution, both the Due Process Clause and the Sixth Amendment, which says you have a right to be told the charges against you. That was never really made clear. And then when we finally got to what it was, the judge gave the jury creatively, and he made this up out of thin air. The judge said, you don't have to be unanimous about the underlying crime. What? That's an essential element. I think that's reversible error. And he gave them a sort of a menu of options. It could be tax issue, it could be a campaign issue. And he allowed the discussion to be, since Cohen had pled guilty to fraud in this matter, that Trump himself was guilty of engaging in the same fraud. That's not the way justice works either. Each defendant, each of the accused, has a right to have his facts, his intent, independently considered by the jury. The judge basically let the prosecution say, and almost in effect from the bench, took judicial notice of the fact that there was some kind of crime, some conspiracy to violate campaign laws. That had never been established. There were a number of other legal errors, in my view, along the way that make this a dubious crime in the first place. But they sort of mushed all this together to create in the minds of the jury and in the minds at least of certain members of the public, well, geez, it would be wrong to hide this affair from the public and to have listed this as a legal expense. I guess in their mind, he should have listed it as, I'm paying hush money to silence a woman I had an affair with. Otherwise, it would have been, as far as they're concerned, a lie. Not even the prosecutor explained how the business entry should have been properly listed. Had he listed it as a campaign expense, that would have violated law. Has he listed this as something else? I'm not sure. No one had even said how he ought to have listed the business expense. In any case, it is an obvious case where reversible error and constitutional violations were involved. There, I absolutely agree with Trump. And the jury here was, in effect, I think, by the judge's own instructions, sort of compelled into a guilty verdict. Just listening to the judge, he made it sound as if there was any such effort, and if there was such a deception, then that would be somehow illegal. That's not the case. It's simply not the case. The judge implied that something that the prosecutor argued, even if it were true. See, Trump denied the affair. Trump said, and Trump expressed that he had other motives, like protecting Melania, for paying for the non-disclosure agreement, whether it was true or not. But all you need is another motive like that, a non-campaign motive like that, and suddenly it has nothing to do with any conspiracy to influence the election, which is all that the prosecution argued. This was a giant conspiracy to influence the election. They silenced this woman who was going to tell the truth. Not that he lied. Well, he did lie in denying it, but then you'd get into the credibility of, well, they didn't want to argue the credibility of Stormy Daniels. Now, the credibility of Mr. Cohen himself, a totally crooked lawyer, is another matter. Why was Trump employing this crooked lawyer? That in itself makes Trump look bad in my mind, but is that in itself illegal? He paid him a lot more money over the years. In fact, Mr. Cohen admitted stealing money over the years from Mr. Trump's organization. He admitted stealing from his client. Now, he paid much more than was ever paid to Stormy Daniels. And we don't even know that Trump knew that the payment was made to Stormy Daniels, except through this Cohen guy. Convicted perjurer, disbarred for misconduct. Everyone knows he's a liar, and he's out to get Trump in a super motivated way. I want to see him caged like an animal, he says. And he's making his living on TikTok now with videos attacking Trump. His livelihood, now that he's been disbarred, is attacking Trump in this very way. Now, that's reasonable doubt on the face of it. On the face of it. Anyone who would rely on anything coming out of this liar's mouth is not understanding what the reasonable doubt standard is. So we can pile on all of my criticisms of this case. It is a sham. I have to agree with Trump. Now, I do not agree with Trump. I do not. I've never voted for Trump. I will never vote for Trump. He is dangerous. On the other hand, in this context, I have to agree with Trump. It is a disgusting spectacle of our time that this is how politics is now being done. Instead of discussing issues of substance, we're now pointing fingers. I mean, Biden has his own corruption issues, not only his son facing criminal charges, but it's been made plain to people with eyes in their heads that the Biden family has been engaged in systematic influence peddling, taking millions of dollars from foreign sources simply to gain access to Biden. That is somewhat apparent to me. But, I am just disgusted that that is how we're arguing politics these days in my country, as opposed to the substance of issues, the size of government, the tax policy, Israel. Any of that should be far more important. But no, we're down in the gutter arguing such depravity. Is Trump a good man? No. Is it illegal to be a bad man? No. I have posted is a wonderful scene from Man for All Seasons where Thomas More explains that he can't just arrest this spy for Cromwell because he's a, quote, bad man. What law does it violate? God's law. Well, then God can arrest him. And Rober then says, well, yeah, I'd cut a path through the law to get at the devil himself. And Thomas More explains, no, 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 no. Yes, you're just the man to do it. But the laws all having been cut down and the devil turned around back on you again. What would you do then? Yes, I give the devil the benefit of the law for my own safety's sake, says More. And I feel exactly that way right now. Trump is a devil in my mind, but I have to give the devil the benefit of the law here. We cannot cut a path through the Sixth Amendment, the Due Process Clause, legal confidentiality, any sane standard of what a reasonable doubt is, just to get at a political opponent. And when we cross that line, America is turning from a place where the legal system once had at least a modicum of integrity to a system in which the criminal legal system is used in a partisan political way. That I find profoundly disturbing. That is more important than any particular candidate, any particular election, any one man or woman. And that, I fear, is the brave new world that my country is now entering in the realm of politics.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Since you brought up A Man for All Seasons, I would love to talk about that, but that's an issue for another time. So one of the things that gets brought up in the British press a lot around Trump's trials, not just around this one, but around a lot of the other ones as well, is, I guess, kind of what you were getting at, which is that the motivation for these seems to be political matters, and that's sort of taken as granted in the British press. And the phrase that comes out is that this is trying to get Capone on taxes. So you have this kind of real problem that Capone is doing. He's bootlegging, he's a gangster, whatever. But you get him on a tiny little technical issue. But what you were saying there, and what you were saying just before we went live, is that it probably wouldn't even qualify to be described that way, given the issue with what they've actually got him on. Is that right?
At least not this case. Mm-hmm. I think that they have some other stronger cases. For example, the classified document case is a much stronger case. There, the ex-president Trump clearly lied, and it is a violation of law to have in your possession after you've left office documents. Now, you can make all kinds of other arguments there. Hey, Hillary Clinton did it. Joe Biden did it. And yes, they did. What was a senator? I mean, at least Trump was president, and the classified documents he could see. Senator Trump, or Senator Biden, mind you, simply lifted classified documents over a number of years and kept them in his garage. Hillary Clinton actually destroyed evidence, destroyed her smartphones so that they couldn't get evidence. Uh, and she was Secretary of State, the equivalent of Foreign Secretary or Foreign Minister here in the States. And she should not have had possession of that. We knew that her documents were. So there's a hypocrisy, just you kind of argument with those. But at least they had him in the classified documents case with some evidence. Now, since then, we've learned that the special prosecutor has tampered with the evidence in that case. Perhaps now it's on indefinite hold because, and one of the issues there is precisely that. Did they alter the evidence? Now, that really irritates me that they would spoil the evidence in their strongest case against Trump, because I would say even if they had let the Democrats get away with the same crime or worse, if at least there's a real crime and you can prove it against Trump, go for it. But no, it appears that the federal prosecutors have screwed up the evidence on what was a much stronger case against Trump. Now, but all of these cases do have the sense of why are they all happening all at once? For example, this case, it's a 7-year-old case. They only filed it in 2023 just so he could be, the timing is perfect, of course, so that he would be tried right in the middle of the election year 2024. It is obviously politically motivated. It is obviously a political show trial. In fact, the entire motivation of all of this all at once. Have there been politicians at least as corrupt as Trump? Yes. Is Trump corrupt in certain ways? Yes. Are these cases politically motivated? Yes. Was this crime actually a crime? After I listened to the presser that the DA Alvin Bragg had after the conviction, I'm still not sure what the crime was.
So, so Trump is they're coming back on, is it the 11th of July or June, something like that? And they're going to decide what the exact punishment of this is. The reporting I was looking at is saying that it's probably not going to be a jail sentence, although hypothetically that seems to be a possible outcome of this. Probably it was being suggested they're just going to slap him with some kind of fine. So, and a lot of the reporting as well is talking about how this is a kind of a historic kind of a thing because no president or former president has actually been charged with a crime before, from understanding that. Even Nixon, I think, was pardoned on Watergate by Ford, right? So,
and many people thought that was a wonderful thing to do. It would be bad for America to criminally try Richard Nixon, it was thought. And now it is true that hurt the president who did it, Mr. Ford, in his reelection efforts. But there were many Democrat observers at the time who said it may have hurt you politically, but it was the right thing to do. Now consider how times have changed. Now they're rubbing their hands in glee and saying, yes, let's cut a path through the law, like Moore said, to get him. Now, if under any normal sentencing guidelines, a person who has no criminal history of convictions or arrests like Mr. Trump, and they commit a nonviolent offense in which it's not clear who the victim even was, should be a fine and only a fine. It is inconceivable to me. For example, Hillary Clinton was found to have, by the Federal Election Commission, mind you, to have violated election law. She was only fined. So it is inconceivable to me that any sane judge, but then again, this judge has done things that I have found entirely outside of any legal norm in the United States in all of my experience, either as a lawyer or as a living, breathing American during the course of my entire lifetime. So this judge does have it out. He's obviously biased. He was a Biden contributor. His daughter makes money on partisan pro-Biden political matters. He should have never been the judge. He's made gross decisions. Now, assuming he's this side of sane and he couldn't put Trump in jail. Let's assume that he's this side of sane. It'll be a fine, but they still will be able to call him a felon. Now, don't be deceived by 34 counts. It's really one course of conduct and a couple of actions. He could only really be sentenced on one of the counts, frankly. Otherwise, that would be a violation of basic due process sentencing law. In any case, Donald Trump has an appeal, and we have to wait for the sentence, for the judgment to be final, for him to be able to commence the appeal. However, he can say, stay the punishment, and that's probably what will happen. Stay the punishment until the appellate courts look at it. But an interesting feature of it coming on through state law, one must legally exhaust the appellate remedies at the state level before one can appeal to the federal courts. I don't know what's happening in New York right now. They're making a hash out of their law. The other thing that he was charged with, the civil matter that the attorney general got him on, again, I think that's a violation of the Constitution. But New York is perfectly willing to make a hash out of their law in order to get this one man. That I find terrifically disturbing. The law and its integrity and constitutional rights, and I don't care how guilty the man is, the integrity of the law itself is more important than the fate of any one defendant or even a president we might not like. So I can promise you, I will not be voting for Trump. On the other hand, I have to agree with Mr. Trump here. This was a political show trial. They're making a hash out of the law. I have to agree with those legal experts who think that great damage is being done, both to our legal and political system. And this is setting a bad precedent. Now, Mr. Trump doesn't care much about the Constitution. I don't think Mr. Trump has an understanding of the integrity of the American legal system. In his mind, he's trying to survive. But I myself have to see this as a disturbing turn in both American politics and even more disturbing in American criminal law practice.
So we have a couple of super chats. So we have $1 from Bonnie. Thank you very much, Bonnie. And then $5 from Robert, who's been a member for 25 months. Thank you, Robert, who says, great point, Mr. Valliant. If Trump really is a menace, all the more reason it's a disaster to compromise our legal system and make him a martyr. Ironically, if you were engineering a conspiracy to energize Trump's base and ensure his re-election, it'd be hard to beat this case and verdict. So something that I saw as well is that supposedly the Trump campaign's received a huge amount of donations just since the decision has been announced, and so
currently over $50 million. It broke the website. The logins and contributions were happening so fast at the website that it crashed.
So do you think in terms of the effect on the election, because so if this is coming from a political motivation, presumably those who are pursuing it are hoping this will damage him. Is this just going to reinforce the people who are already going to vote Trump, or for the swing voters who are really going to be relevant there? Is it going to bring them to Trump's side, do you think? Will it put them off, or what? How do you think about it?
Well, there are those who say this will further energize the Trump base. Well, I can't imagine the Trump base being any more energized than they presently are, frankly. Nor do I think it will energize the Democratic base. They are, however, that is an interesting point, because there is a sort of lack of enthusiasm for Biden that you're starting to see breaking out all over the left. Will this? No, this won't get them to change their mind if Israel is the problem. If, for example, I don't think it changes the Democrat base either. I think that is the independents, the undecideds, and they have grown, and I would think that it's a matter of perception now. It really is. Do you really believe that? And that, I think one of the problems that Democrats have is that every time they say, oh, the indictment, that'll get him. The independents will turn on him. Nope. The trial, the facts coming out, that'll get, no. And each time they keep making a prediction that this will swing the independents. Now, there has been some polling that suggested that at least some independents, you look at the polls, most independents apparently won't care one way or another, if the polling is correct. But there is a larger percentage who would be negatively influenced, but they said before this, by a guilty verdict that would be positively influenced by a not guilty verdict. So I think there is a squishy group of independents. They're not terribly large, but the margin, look at the margin, one of the interesting things about the polls right now is on issues like the economy and inflation, Trump or Israel, Trump is doing 15, 20 points better than Biden. And yet in the national polls, they're only a point or two apart. Why isn't that better reflected in well, that's Trump. And I think people have a very consolidated view in that most people have already figured out Trump. They knew all about Stormy Daniels before this 2016 election. So I don't see this moving the needle much. You tell me that he listed this as a legal expense? Really? And I'm supposed to care? So I think a very few independents might be negatively influenced. But then again, it's a razor thin difference. They're in the national polls, some of them, they're neck and neck, they're tied, or they're only 1 or 2 points apart. That could make the difference. So I guess that's a long way of saying I don't know, Morgan.
Well, fair enough. Fair enough. Frank gives $2 and says, "Is Alan Dershowitz correct that Trump's lawyers were bad?" What do you think about their performance in this?
I think they did make, well, I, as lawyers, and Professor Dershowitz is a former professor at Harvard Law School, and I normally, his legal analysis, I totally disagree with him, things like the OJ case. But here he makes a great point, and other lawyers make, and the one I would focus on is the denial of the affair. In making such a big stick, he could have denied it outside of court, but if he comes into court and says, I'm not going to take a position one way or another, it would have rendered all of that lurid testimony irrelevant. The only thing that made that lurid testimony relevant was the in court, I deny it happened. And he didn't have to do that. And that at least opened up enough of it. Now, do I think the judge went too far and let much more of that in than ought to have been let in under Evidence Code 352, the federal evidence code, says you have to weigh the probative value against the prejudicial effect. And in this case, getting into all those details, was he wearing boxers? How long did he last? All these lurid details about sex should have probably been regarded as irrelevant. But at least some of it was made relevant by Trump's own lawyers.
Yes, that was the one part of the case that I did read about during the course of it. That they got into all this kind of nitty-gritty stuff, and that was certainly an element of it that I saw, and I thought, goodness gracious, what does this lend to any kind of prosecution case against Trump?
But
So
have American presidents had all sorts of lurid affairs that they've tried to keep secret? Yes, 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 yes.
yeah, well, certainly Clinton. I mean, even Kennedy, of course. So James, I guess so. Elon Musk was tweeting about this and saying something similar to you, I guess, which is that this is damaging to the integrity of the American legal system. So is this going to be the future of American law then? Do you think state by state? Because New York is a big Democrat state, right? Which is presumably why you're saying that they're wanting to go after this. Is the future from the American legal system that you're going to have to be very careful about which state you're tried in, depending on whether they're red or whether they're blue, and so on?
I think it depends upon how the rest of for example, if this does not serve the Democrats' interest here, if say Trump gets elected, that would be a big blow to the possibility of this. I don't think that's sufficient reason to vote for Trump. I'm just saying that should Trump get elected, I think it would discourage this. The other thing is, will this be slapped down on appeal? Will this be reversed as the obvious big fat set of due process violations that it actually was? If that happens, that we need appellate courts to come in, and if necessary, the U.S. Supreme Court to come in and say this is improper. But if that does not happen, then it is nearly inevitable that red states will have to follow suit and start charging men like Biden with bribery. If I pay $1 million to your close family member, that's bribery. If I'm gaining access, well, why can't we use the current influence peddling investigation? Why can't Wyoming, a solidly red state, I doubt they would have any sympathy for Biden. You could reproduce against Biden in Wyoming what just happened in New York City. And that would be a very, very disturbing turn of events where one state is throwing their political enemies into prison just to effect an election. That would be truly disturbing. But I only see that happening, frankly, should the courts not do the right thing here. And I think that at least the federal courts will do the right thing. As for the election results, I'm going to be interested to see the polls. Obviously we have to wait a few days now, but I want to see what independents think of the bare fact of conviction and how many of them are swayed. Most of them will not be swayed, but will enough be swayed that might swing the election? That's the way I'd look at it,
Mm. Okay.
if that makes
My
sense.
camera's my camera's lagging a bit. I hope you guys can hear me okay. So we have the reality show coming up. I hope you guys will join us there where we're talking about South Africa. Thank you very much, guys. We'll see you later.
Be well.